Tennessee. Girl down on my knees. These little words I begin to sing. I've been working on
So this is a Bravo rack for the new 2022 Toyota Tundra. When you unpack everything, you're going to find your load bars, your windscreen. This is a no-cut windscreen. Based on the order options that you placed, you may have holes or notches in this that are specified for the light in your order. If your windscreen is cut for another light, you'll also have secondary hardware that we won't cover in this video that's for attaching the light bar either to the windscreen or to the front load bar for the universal fitments. The sides, driver and passenger, and then your foot system that'll help attach the roof rack to the truck. The 22 Tundra does not have pre-threaded locations, so there is drilling required for this installation. The hardware kit for the Bravo rack is a universal kit that we make in-house, and the bags will be labeled by part number for the installation according to where the hardware should go. As with all of our racks, in your hardware kits, there will be some leftover nuts and bolts. We do ship spares, and then there are some applications where those bolts don't specifically go to this rack. First, you'll need to assemble the rivet foot to the load bar clamp. All of these, and there are 6 of them in your kit, the orientation is the angle piece needs to sit on the outside of the bent part of the rivet foot. The hole alignment allows you to dial in the height of the rack. We know already that the middle and rear feet should be assembled all the way down, and you see where your holes will line up here. And the front feet will be aligned one space up from that, and we'll do that one in a second. So the hardware provided, you're going to need a 1/2-inch wrench and a 1/2-inch ratchet. You don't require Loctite for this because we are doing nylock hardware on here. So your rear and middle feet should be in this position. See where the holes overlap each other, and you want to make sure that you put your hardware in at the top, because when this goes on the drip rail of the truck, if you're in this lower position, this hardware could contact the roof of the truck and it would cause damage to the finish. For the front feet, we want to be +1 in the position. If you see these exposed holes sitting over top of this lip, that's elevated enough to account for the slope of the roof of the truck. So align your hardware like this. And assemble it just like we did the other foot. You'll have 2 that are in this position. You'll have 4 that are in the other position. So this is an assembled front foot. Pay attention to your position. Make sure your hardware is at the top so that when it's on the truck, this is as far away from the roof of the truck as possible. The difference in height between your middle and rear feet and your front foot . These would be your middle and rear feet. The hardware's installed and it's sitting pretty flush to the top. It's at the lowest position. These would be your front feet. They're elevated up 1 notch, and again, the hardware stays at the top. This slot will be what connects these feet to your load bar. The next step is going to be to connect the feet to the load bar. This bag of hardware here has your threaded inserts for your load bars, and then the bolts, lock washers, and flat washers. Before you proceed with this step, you're going to need to install the included VC3 to the threads of all the bolts and let that air dry for 15 minutes. You only need the VC3 on the last 3 or 4 threads of the fastener, but you want to make sure that it goes 360 degrees around it. And right now, see where it's really wet? When you come back and you touch it and it doesn't stick to your finger like that, it's ready to install. Next, you're going to mount your assembled foot to your load bar. This threaded insert needs to go to the inside. If you see the protrusion of the threads, that faces away from the slot on the foot. Each location threads in. You want to leave it loose enough that you can push it back and forth, because this gap is what's going to allow this to slide onto the load bar. Because the feet are the same for the driver and passenger side, one of them will fit in the load bar like that, and the other one would be the exact reverse at the opposite end. Once you have all your load bar feet put together, we're ready to place them on top of the roof and put the sides on the rack. Okay, so this is loose enough I can adjust it. Now I'm just going to set them up on the roof inside of the drip rail. You want to align the flat part of this inside the drip rail of the truck. I've set all 3 load bars on top of the truck. Now we're going to get the side and the load bar hardware, and we'll attach that. The side will actually help you align where the load bar should set in the drip rail before you start to mount that to the truck. Now we're going to take the load bar hardware. We're going to align the side. The very rear section won't have a load bar in it yet. You're going to align from the second to the rear, then you're going to skip one. You want the next one to align to the middle of the rack. Then you'll skip another one, and the last one will be in the 2 slots from the front. Now slide this back to where the load bar hardware is all the way forward in the slot. Tighten this up, put the other side on the rack the exact same way as you did this side, then install the missing load bars. So the front anchor foot needs to be assembled and then attached to the rack. You've got your rivet plate. The stud will be installed when it arrives to you. You take your 3/16 spacer. See the long slot and the short slot? The short slot goes to the roof rack. The long slot goes over the stud. Then your fender washer. Whoops. Like that, right? And then your nut. And you want to leave this loose enough that you can articulate this guy to get him to line up. When it goes on the truck, there's no guarantee which way it's going to set, because on the driver's side of the truck, the drip rail runs off like this, and then on the passenger side, it runs off like that. You want this loose enough that you can adjust this and align the rivet locations to the middle of your drip rail. This hardware goes to the roof rack. Your roof rack side would be right here. The bolt's going to pass through the roof rack, through the slot in the foot, and then the washer and the nylon lock nut will go on like that. So now let's go put them on the truck. Locate the hole behind the gills right next to the scene pod. It's the only large hole down here. Slide the foot into the rack, push the bolt through, and then install the flat washer and the nylon lock nut. Use the adjustment in there to rotate the rivet plate so that it follows the contour as it drops off the truck. This will let you articulate the angle to mount the front of the rack. You can use a 1/2-inch wrench and a 3/16 Allen. Make sure that the rivet plate is adjusted to follow this contour on the truck right here inside of the drip rail, and then just tighten the foot in place first. And you won't tighten the 10mm bolt between the foot and the rivet plate until after the rivet plate is installed. So the windscreen will install to match the angle of the front of your rack, and the bent flanges on the windscreen will align to these holes right here. You definitely want to install this with your buddy. Again, I got my buddy right there. So take this thing, rotate the windscreen in place and align the holes, and then slip the hardware through the holes, top and bottom, so it doesn't rotate, and then reach inside and install the nuts. We'll tighten that hardware up, but you can see the profile and the fit and how close it hugs the roof. So reach inside and clamp the nut in place with a 13mm wrench, and use a 5mm Allen to tighten up all the hardware. Oh. Now reach inside with a 13mm wrench on the nut, and then tighten up with a 3/16 Allen. At this point, we've got the Bravo rack fully assembled. All the load bars are in, the windscreen's attached. Now you're ready to go to the part of the video where you actually drill and install the rivets to anchor the roof rack to the truck. Your hardware kit ships with a drill bit and a stop collar so that we can limit the depth that we're actually drilling into the drip rail, which eliminates taking apart the interior of the truck. We're able to stop this before it can go through and contact any interior sheet metal, airbag, wiring harness, anything crazy like that. It makes this process really safe. So you've got your 3/16" drill bit and your stop collar. The little set screws take a 3/32" Allen wrench. Just thread that on. You want to leave a 1/2 inch of depth between the end of your stop collar and the tip of your drill bit, and then tighten that into place like that. And then it's designed that when you drill the hole, it will literally contact the foot. It punches just through the roof to clearance for the rivet, and then it'll stop you on your own. The roof attachment is going to require the use of a rivet gun. You can get these just about any auto parts store has them in stock. And the way this works is once you have the holes drilled in the drip rail, you'll align this rivet, you'll push it down through the foot, and as you crank this, you see it start to swell. It will lock in place. If you have it in the roof, obviously it stays flat. And it swells up like this to bite inside of that hole and secure the rivet base to the roof of the truck. So the small pocketed area inside the rivet foot has a through hole in it, and that's where you're going to align your drill bit. The top layer here is nothing but rubber and seam sealer. That part will go through pretty quick. Now see where it stopped right there? I'm touching some metal. So I'll back this out, move the rubber out of the way, and now I'm just going to set and work that hole. It went through the first layer of metal. See, it naturally stops itself right there. And then I can use a pick tool and verify that I am going all the way through. And once we clean this out, we'll be ready to install the sealant and the rivet. We're going to work our way down. You want to drill all the holes at one time. You don't want to move the rack around. You want to use the foot as a guide and then drill each individual hole. Then we'll lift it up, put the sealant in there, and then install the rivets. Once you have both sides of the truck's holes drilled to align with the feet, locate the foam gasket material that comes. You've got like long ones and then short ones. The short ones go at the very front of the rack by the narrower foot. These will align underneath here. This eliminates the need to have to try and smear silicone underneath this thing. So have your friend lift the rack up and just locate a foam strip underneath each foot, and then take a small screwdriver that you know will fit through the opening in the hull of your foot and use it to puncture the foam and align it underneath the feet. And then do that for every location, and then we'll be ready to come back and rivet it in place. Now get your rivet gun and the rivets that we provided with your kit. Align it to the hull. Push it down until it's seated, and then just operate the rivet gun until it starts to cinch everything together. When you hear it pop like that, it's snapped the head the way that it needs to be to bind, and then that foot is anchored in place. Now we'll just work our way down. We'll do one side, then we'll do the other side. So when you get to the front, to provide clearance for the tool to clear, you'll want to move the load bar to the forwardmost position, even if you're not going to run it there long term. Okay. With all the rivets installed, we want to go back and put the sealant on the top of every rivet head to seal it. The foam underneath will seal the foot to the truck, but we don't want to leave the open hole on the top of the rivet exposed to the weather. We use an acrylic silicone sealant. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as it's exterior grade. We get a lot of questions about clear or black. That's user preference. Just about any silicone product that you can get at a hardware store will work for this step. So just aim at the rivet. And then use your finger to wipe it down into position. Make sure it seals the hole in the top of the rivet. And allow that to dry. Don't take it to an automatic car wash for probably the first 24 to 48 hours. Make sure that your sealant is fully cured before you start hitting it with crazy water amount and stuff like that. So the Alpha Rack includes a dual wall design with the inner groove tech and the outer armor. And when the two are bolted together, that provides the discrete channels for the wiring and things like that for your rack. The Alpha Racks also include the grab handles, and as you can see here with the Lunar Rock, these pieces can be color matched to the vehicle, whether it's powder coat or paint. You can get either option to match the exterior finish of your vehicle. The prepackaged hardware kit that ships through your Alpha Rack has enough hardware in it to do multiple vehicles. So a lot of the hardware in this bag you may not use for any given application. The bags are numbered to tell you what task they'll complete. And with the load bars in position on the roof, we're going to grab bag 8001.2 and we're going to attach the groove tech to the 3 load bars that are on the roof before we put in the rest of them. So the groove tech has factory installed riv nuts where the armor will anchor once you've completed your installation. And it's important, if you look, the protrusion, the fat side of the riv nut on either piece would face the inside of the vehicle, and the flat side should be to the outside. That makes this a passenger side and this a driver's side piece. So the groove tech needs to align to the load bars. You need to skip the rear, catch the second from the back, skip one, then it goes into this one, then you skip this one, and then it goes into this one. The other load bars will be anchored after we put on the other side. With the hardware started, we want to make sure that the load bars are seated at the front of each of these 3 slots and then tighten the hardware in place. Now we'll install the rear and front load bar, and for that you need hardware bag 8001.1 featuring the hex nuts. We use hex nuts at the rear and the front of the rack because the hardware attachment points are hidden behind the armor, and if you wanted to be able to adjust them later, you can simply use a wrench between the armor and the groove tech on the hex nut to adjust the load bar into position. You'll want a friend for this to help you extend the load bar across the truck. On the Tundra, the rear load bar can be mounted horizontally like this or vertically like this using the far holes at the back of the rack that actually point to the ground in the sky. Because we have antenna clearance on this, we're going to keep this one horizontal. Align the load bar to the top hole at the back of the groove tech, and then the other bolt will go to the back of the slot. Because we use this truck to install the Bravo rack, the front feet are already attached. They'll align on your groove tech to this hole that's down here by itself below this groove. Right now we're installing the front load bar. We'll come back and do this hardware. This upper slot is for horizontal mounting of the load bar. The upper slot with the small holes at the bottom is for mounting the front load bar vertically for increased weight capacity for larger light bar installations. In that instance, these slots that are milled in here are to help you pass wiring through the front load bar to the other side of the rack to keep everything concealed. Now we'll install the remaining load bars in the open position slots.
Go.
So the remaining load bars can be mounted anywhere within the slot that they go into. You just want to make sure that you have them even on the driver and passenger side. For this truck, we're going to slide them all the way forward, tighten them down. With the front foot loosely assembled, align the slot to the hole in the groove tech, put the bolt through, then install the flat washer and the nylon lock. When you've got it snug, correct the angle of the foot to match the contour of the roof of the truck, and then fully tighten this bolt. After you're done with the install, you'll come back and tighten up this 10mm nut, but not until the truck's already drilled and riveted. The windscreen that you ordered with your rack may have additional steps to mate the lighting. We're not going to cover that in this guide. We're going to cover that in a video for lighting and electrical installation. To install the windscreen, you need bag 8001.3 and your VC3 thread locker. So the VC3 ships like this. You need to unscrew the cap, remove the stop collar. When you screw the top down, it'll puncture. Do not squeeze the tube when you're doing this. And then it's ready to dispense. Cover the last ½ inch or so of the bolt. And allow this to dry about 10 or 15 minutes before you install these. You want this material to be completely dry to the touch. See how it's stringy? You don't want that. You want to touch it and nothing happens, then it's ready to use. Installing the windscreen takes 2 people just because it is a little heavy and you're going across the front of the truck and you don't want to bang against the finish and do any damage. Take the windscreen, hand it over, and then align the holes in the side of the bent flange to the 2 front holes in your groove tech. The windscreen does go to the inside of the groove tech. And install your bolts. Once you have it like that, you can let it go, and then you can reach inside and install the nuts to the back of the hardware. Now that we've got the windscreen attached, we're ready to install the armor. If you're installing the optional seam pods, you'll want to trim out these knockouts before you put this part on the truck, just to avoid damaging the finish on the truck by cutting it out with an air saw or hacksaw. You'll use hardware bag 8001.5. In the bag, you're going to find the bolts, lock washers, and spacers. The bolts are going to go through the armor, and then the plastic spacers are going to go behind the armor, between the armor and groove tech, and you're going to attach at the front and the rear. The inner holes are for the grab handles. It'll be loose like this in the middle until you install the grab handles, and that's when it'll start to pull it together. You guys can refer to our video on grab handle tying to get to this step. For this truck, we've already tied up all 4 handles and installed the safety wire. To mount them to the armor and groove tech, we're going to use bag 8001.6. In this bag, you're going to find the longer 55mm bolts, lock washers, and spacers. To properly install it, you're going to put a bolt through, then it'll get a spacer, it'll go through the armor, you'll install the second spacer between, and thread it into the rib nut in the groove tech.
Now you're ready to tighten up the rear and front bolt for the armor. Then refer to the torque spec chart at the back of this installation video, tighten up all the hardware, set everything in place, and then you're ready to go.